One of the most vital aspects of doing a role-playing game is keeping track of time. Today I'm going to talk about 3 aspects of tracking time in D&D with an emphasis on how they affect the flow of the game and also the storytelling that's inherent in a role-playing game. And I'm going to try to keep the discussion under 15 minutes. Time management. Hello again, I'm KR King. This is my YouTube channel dedicated to homebrewing a campaign. Thinking about time and its effects has been an issue with philosophers and thinkers since the beginning of time. And it's very critical in terms of running a campaign in Dungeons & Dragons. Whether it's the minute to hour, micro level of actually running the game, or the more macro level of days and weeks in terms of the players actually living in your world. And then there's the operational aspect of actually running the game and how much player time are you going to use for different facets of running a campaign. So let's start at the micro level, as I said, minute to hour, kind of the game mechanics of actually running the game. You know, all of the actions in D&D are defined partly by how long they take to do. Spells are partly defined in regards to time of casting, time of effect. Turns are defined as a duration. Movement in space is defined how far can you go in space in the duration of a turn. So we interact as players with the GM in terms of time and space. We're always thinking about ourselves and our opponents in regards to how far away are they and how quickly can we either, engage with them or get away from them. And we adjudicate what's happening in many ways in terms of rules about how long things take. We track the passage of time with that in turns. So when we look at the micro level, I tend to use what I call the 10-minute rule. In terms of 10-minute increments for a lot of stuff that happens in D&D, activities or whatever. So a battle may only take, 2 or 3 minutes or something, right? But in fact, when you think about the battle, the aftermath, searching the bodies or whatever, tending to the injured. So I'll use that 10 minutes as a starting point in terms of tracking time spent. Then I'll add or subtract depending on the circumstances. If the players are surprised, they have a quick battle, and then they decide to quickly move somewhere else, it's going to be less than 10 minutes. On the other hand, if they heard something and then they were preparing for the battle, then they have the battle, the search is very thorough of this room, they're trying to read something or decipher something, it's going to take longer than 10 minutes. And there are other activities that occur. Glancing into a room quickly does take 10 seconds. To search it thoroughly, it might take 10 minutes. A larger room might take 20. An encampment, if you're outside, I want to search each hut and be careful and you don't want to miss something. Again, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you want. Now, there's tons of information online that you can access that gives you ideas about how long things should take. And I'm going to put some links to those in the comments section below. I'm also going to put some links to some tracking tools that are out there. And some are like a wheel, some are like a checklist that you make. And these are really great tools to facilitate tracking time, because I do believe tracking time in this way at the micro level is as important as using miniatures, which I talked about in my first episode, because it lends a sense of realism, dynamism. The players can see what happens when they see the time being tracked. They know this is happening sequentially. I have to do this, I have to do that. Time keeps on ticking, right? It adds that intensity. So you think about explorers, whether they're going down into a cave or climbing a mountain, keeping track of time is very important to them. It can mean life or death. The same thing occurs in D&D. Your players would be tracking their time carefully. So if you're using the short, long rest standard rules in the 5e edition, they're thinking about spell and injury economy. Okay, we got to take a short rest for an hour. Think about sitting for an hour. Whether you're down in a dungeon or some complex or the great outdoors, you become a sitting target. You're there for an hour for anything that might hear, see, or smell you. The other thing that's interesting about resting for an hour in a room is they may notice things in that hour that even a 10-minute or 20-minute search, there may be some mural up on the ceiling that they never really noticed, or an outline in the floor. There may be a smell that was very subtle at first, but it's now leaking from a little crack in the wall. There may be a distant sound, barely heard unless you're sitting very still for an hour, the beating of some drum. And the thing is, they have to just sit there and wait for the hour to transpire. And when you're tracking along and the day progresses, the party may be faced with spending the night, either in a cavern or dungeon, or even out in the wilderness in terrain that they may not want to spend in, which you take a risk, right? And you're tracking that time, they're aware of it, you're aware of it, and they have to make decisions based on that. Now, at the macro level of D&D, time becomes less about time and space as it is being in time. So you're going to have a calendar based on the planet, circling the sun once a year and turning each day 24 hours light and dark, because that's what affects temperature, the growing seasons, agriculture is how people survive, or the migration of animals. I tend, because I like to keep things simple, to just take 24 hours, and you can use 365, the Earth calendar. At times I've used 10 months of 30 days, so a 300-day circumference, just to keep things even. The farther out you get in terms of months and years, the less direct impact it's going to have to your players anyway. Unless they're racing against time in terms of some event, say a solar eclipse, or some festival that's arising. So you've got your year, how long it is, day, this sort of thing. Now it comes to the issue of tracking macro time, tracking the days and weeks in your campaign. And I've run in campaigns where GMs are very kind of loosey-goosey about this. They'll say, okay, to do this, it takes you 8 days. And you say, okay. And he says, okay, the 8 days are over. What are you doing now? And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. What about all the other stuff in the campaign here? How come no one ever came around? And as a player, you don't want to say that, because I don't want random monsters if I don't have them. The problem, though, is that the world starts to feel a little unreal. Really 8 days just go by and nothing's changed from when we were just running? So if you want your players to believe in your world, you need to track this time just like you do at the micro level. They need to feel like the world is moving along day by day, week by week, and things are reflected in that time moving. So the classic example is players hear about some orcs harassing a village. They track the orcs back to their outpost or cave where they're hiding, and they have a battle, and they kill almost all of them. 1 or 2 orcs escape. They try to track them, they can't find them. But the village is safe, they go back to town. So let's say that they're going to spend a week in town training or researching or doing something. Meanwhile, the orcs, it's 2 days back to their main encampment. Where they arrive, they tell about their battle. The chieftains discuss this. They decide, we are going to have our revenge. 2 days back to this village, and they slaughter the village. Now they've got a much bigger group. 1 or 2 of the villagers escape. They make it back to town in a day, and they tell the players what's happened. The players come back to the burning hulk of the town, but the orcs are long gone. And in fact, if they track the orcs back to their main encampment, maybe they've gone as well. The point is here, is when time goes by, when they're in town training or researching or whatever, and those orcs are out there in the world, they're spending time as well. And you think about how long does it take them to get back to their main encampment, decide what to do, come back to the village, etc., etc. When the players begin to see, oh, the world is tracking too, the world has time to do things, the creatures in the world are thinking about things and doing things, it makes it real. But in order to do that, you got to be always tracking time. The other thing is, as the players go up in level and their influences increase, there are going to be more subplots. There's going to be more NPCs and situations that you got to be tracking that in terms of the time. Now, I've talked about this before where everything is kind of frozen in place, right? Until your players meet something, they're just there that you've written down. They're in this, compound or complex or whatever. But once the players meet them and have some interaction, then time begins to work for them. And as the players go do other things and you're tracking time, you think about what these other creatures might be doing. And again, it might be just doing what they were doing before they ever met the players and nothing really changes. But typically, if you want kind of a dynamic campaign, things have changed with those NPCs, and you track them as you go along. And then the final thing is the operational sense of tracking time. So a battle that may take 5 or 10 minutes in real game time can take 3 hours to play in terms of playing the game. Meanwhile, a 5-day journey along a road may only take, 3 minutes to describe. You roll some random monsters or whatever, and then you're there. And the reason we do this is really where the relationship of storytelling and role-playing games come into play. You could play every turn of that 5-day journey along the road. You could have everybody rolling initiative and asking what they do over and over and over, right? But you're not going to do that. Why? Because the activity is mundane. I'm on my horse, I'm marching down the road. Unless I'm encountered, unless something happens, you just say, okay, you're done. So think about if somebody tells you, hey, I ran a marathon the other day. Really? Wow. How long did it take you? A little over 4 hours. How was it? Well, it was hard, but I'm glad I did it. Okay. And that's pretty much it. Less than a minute. Because unless there were some incidents, then I collapsed, or if you talk about the training that was involved, the activity itself is mundane. You're just running from point A to point B, and it's 26 and some miles, right? If I tell you about a car accident that took 3 seconds, the story that I'm telling you takes a lot longer, right? I tell you about driving down the road, I see the car coming, I press the brakes, I realize, oh my God, I'm gonna hit this car, boom, the airbag explodes in my face, the sound of the car smashing, rolling over, whatever happens, sitting there going, oh my God, I'm alive, right? It's a very long story about something that took 3 seconds. Good storytellers know when to compress and when to expand time. Same thing in terms of operational time tracking in Dungeons and Dragons. When we have battles, we expand time, right? We do these 6-second increments. We ask everyone, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? We play this out. And something that would take 5 minutes takes 3 hours to play. And it's because it's exciting, because it's not mundane. Every strike, every action by every person has a tremendous import and can change things in a second. Life or death situation. Good storytellers know this is where you expand time. This is where you go over things in detail. Another operational technique that you might think about is when you have an encounter with something, you don't allow table talk. You say to everybody, okay, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing, right? And nobody gets a chance. I just want to know because it's happening like this. We got a boom, 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 right? Now, if you start to use this all the time, the game can become sort of exhausting. People feel like they're put on the spot. Oh, what do I do? You know, inexperienced players may not like this or whatever. But every once in a while, if you use this technique, especially when it's, you know, the big bad villain or some person that everyone's been waiting on or a surprise thing or whatever, you know, again, use judiciously. This kind of operational marking of time very quickly, move, 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 what are you doing, what are you doing, can really heighten the tension. Now, there's another thing in terms of operational time, and that's when you're planning, you know how long you're going to run. And you're thinking about, you know, how many encounters am I going to have? How long is this going to take? How long is that? Because I want to fit it in. Let's say you're going to run for 3 hours. And you're deciding what kind of encounters or whatever. Now, again, in a sandbox campaign, they're going to go here or there, or do things you don't expect. But you're going to have an idea of how things could take. And part of this is because you want to end the session where the players are either in a safe place or they're between encounters, or there's some place where everyone can sort of sit back, they know their characters are okay, they can think about the next run, and they can think about what happened and talk about it, and they're not right in the middle of something. And I think generally speaking, this is a good idea, but I'm going to push back a little bit because what can happen is you can try to force things, right, to end at a space. You can fudge things around or change things, and it can be a little obvious to the players and kind of hurt your campaign. Now, if you run too long, people can start to get tired and frustrated, or I need to go home. Why are we in the middle of this battle? And I get that. So there are techniques that you can use in terms of tracking operational time to make sure that your sessions don't end in a sort of awkward position. One of the things, if you know a battle is coming up and you've only got half an hour to go, you can put something in the player's way. Give them something interesting to inspect or whatever, and then we get to the end and you say, okay, we're going to stop here, you're in this room or you're in this safe area, let's stop till next time. Or you can just tell the players, look, we've got half an hour to go, but I've got this big thing coming up, why don't we stop here, right? And again, this may evolve naturally, the players say, okay, because typically if you know some big thing and you've already gone 3 hours and this is going to take, 2 or 3 more, they're going to be ready to do this. They're still in the dungeon or the complex or whatever, but they're in some place where they know they can just come back and play. They're not in the middle of action. So operationally, this is a very good way to control the time. They don't have to be back in town. They don't have to be in some safe place. And we just accept that. So there you have some ideas on tracking time from the micro level, macro level, and operational level. I would encourage you to look at the links that I have in the comments section below for some of the tools for using this tracking of time. And I would encourage you to track time as closely as you can and also expand that tracking to the NPCs and creatures of your world. I hope you enjoyed this. If you liked it, please subscribe. Please leave me some comments. Tell me about some time tracking stuff that you've used, some calendars you've used. I've got all sorts of specialized calendars and years and cultural things that I've used over the years, and I may do a video on that. In the meantime, keep playing D&D and tell someone else about it.